Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 24th meeting of the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education. It is now 7:13 p.m. I'm sorry, we're starting a little late. The board has been in executive session since 6 p.m. Can I have a motion, please, to reopen the public meeting? All in favor? Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Here tonight from Roaring Brook. So we are going to let them start the show tonight.
So Mrs. Wilson, please welcome to the microphone and thank you for joining us. We're going to start with a round of applause. Okay, turning it over.
All right, so good evening to the esteemed members of the Board of Education, Dr. Ackerman, and the CCSD cabinet. The title of tonight's presentation is Using Benchmark Phonics to Enable Students to Become Powerful Readers and Writers. So tonight's presentation fits nicely with the district's strategic priorities that have been developed to ensure student growth in all academic areas. As educators, we are constantly evaluating programming to ensure student growth. So rethinking traditional curriculum fits nicely with what's happening in the schools now in terms of phonics. When thinking about reading and writing, grammar and phonics are almost always mentioned together. Grammar is the framework or the structure, and phonics relates to the sounds and how we create words. At the elementary level, teachers are working to explicitly teach grammar and also phonics. All Chappaqua Elementary students are exposed to a robust literacy program that centers on the National Reading Panel's 5 pillars of literacy. So phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. With that as a foundation, our students are engaged with the units of study in reading and writing. Phonics first, K through 2, and benchmark phonics and grammar and grades 3 through 4. Handwriting without tears, phonemic and phonological awareness, K2 read alouds, shared reading, and interactive writing.
Although the focus this evening will be on benchmark phonics, which is taught in grades 3 and 4, we thought it would be pertinent to mention our students' experiences in kindergarten through 2nd grade. With explicit instruction in phonics, students then move to practicing with decodable texts. Benchmark phonics. Tonight, you will see students demonstrate components of the phonics and word study workshop. How it all comes together, becoming independent readers and writers. Used together, the modules connect through topics and skills to provide a powerful, cohesive framework for integrated reading, writing, listening, and speaking instruction. Tonight, Ms. Dorio's 4th grade students will highlight building automaticity, sorting words, and extending the learning.
So here is the significance of each of the components. So students work to build automaticity, and the 3 highlights there would be in the classroom, students work on fluency, and this is the ability to read text accurately, fluidly, and with confidence. Fluent readers decode or focus on meaning rather than worrying about decoding so much. And students work on activities that increase their fluency each week. So that's something that you'll see this evening. there's a word sort. So students analyze words for patterns and or categories, and students look for common characteristics and meaning. And then we put it all together for extend the learning. So students develop an award awareness through real life experiences by understanding the meanings of words and creating connections. So we would now like to transition to the portion of the presentation where RBS fourth graders will demonstrate each of these areas. That's the fun part, highlighted this evening.
Like they're bound down, right, like that. By the category.
But also you take a look at the powerful sense. You get a feel for what the people's
Four words in common. I know, I played it for the first time. I thought it was terribly hard. There's a lot of size. Oh.
Here, several more times. Our presentation this evening. I'd like to thank fourth grade teacher Andrea Dorio. And Ross Cooper, assistant principal. One of their insight and professional guidance and to use together this wonderful presentation. Highlight our students. So thank you to the fourth graders who worked hard this evening sharing their experiences with this program. So students. That go back to the yes, so I'll put your questions now and then I'll use Mr. Kelsey, you have a question. Yes. Thank you.
I would ask a question. I was talking with at this table. Anyone can answer. It was like doing all these exercises was super fun. I'm curious to hear your reflection about how it helps you learn to read.
It's because how to pronounce the word and how to like see it. Like how you see it. Like I do not like that you try because if you silent and
About the connection game you're playing over here. So some words can go in both categories. So does that make it trickier, or does it help you knowing to understand how the word can be two things at once?
it depends. I think kind of both at the same time. Because it makes you like think more and also makes it more trickier so you can learn. Yeah.
So I'm curious, there were all these different games to help you guys become more fluent readers. Do you have a favorite? Is it a unanimous favorite or different favorites? I want to hear from all of you. Say the one you're
I didn't really understand the connection.
I got connections correct my first try. Maybe or not, but I got lucky. But I did want to ask these words. Do you then hold yourselves a little bit more accountable to getting, maybe trying to use them more in your writing, or maybe having to spell these words that you've been working on during the week properly at all? Do you think about these words when you're writing?
Not really. Like when we were writing, supposed to show how, like instead of saying like he brushed his teeth, like he picked up a toothbrush, put toothpaste on it, and he scrubbed the brush around his mouth. Like,
But if toothbrush was in the connections game, would you say, oh, I remember this word and I made a connection with the word toothbrush being a compound word, I better spell it right. Would you think that?
Yeah. Like really hard and you have to do it a lot of time. Yeah.
Remember, I was having fun in school.
So thank you for coming out. Welcome.
They were really great. We were practicing today. They were very excited. We may pretend the other students that are not here were the board members. But I would like to introduce the fourth graders. So it's Miles Badger Lee and wave. Stuff. Nothing one. Ben Weitzman. Harper Bentley. Layla Lewis. David Park.
Sarah. Thank you so much. Us to work with children tonight coming out, and I'd like to thank the Roaring Brook team for being here. And we would love to have a good picture of our Roaring Brook working group out in the hallway right here with our teachers and with our principals. So
Okay, so thank you for everybody who followed us to the Academic Commons to see the Roaring Brook presentation. I hope those of you who weren't able to follow us in person got to watch it here. They were great. And it's always super fun to see what's going on in the classrooms. So for those of you following along with the agenda, we always let our younger students present first, even though they're not technically first on the agenda, just so they can go home and go to bed at a reasonable hour. So we thank our Roaring Brook students and faculty for their presentation tonight. So I'm going to jump into the president's report now. I want to start by providing some updates, and I'm going to begin with updates on SROs. As you know, our 2 new officers are starting imminently, and we are very excited for them to join our school communities. We also have been working diligently, as we assured you that we would, to address potential alternate ways to fund the SRO program. We have been researching every option available to us on the right side of legality, and will continue to do so. We hope to have information about potential options soon. We also, as we have discussed before, believe strongly that keeping our school communities safe and providing an excellent public education are both central to our responsibilities, but that those 2 responsibilities should not be in fiscal opposition. It should not come out of our pedagogical budget to keep our students, faculty, and staff safe. To that end, yesterday, Dr. Ackerman and I sent a joint letter on behalf of the board and the district to Governor Hochul, as well as every New York State Assembly member and senator, asking for security personnel expenses to be exempt from the tax levy limit. If codified, this exemption would afford us a considerable amount more fiscal flexibility. That letter will be posted on our website by tomorrow. Many of you, I know sincerely, have asked what you can do to help. Here's something you can do. Write to your elected representatives in New York State and reiterate this request. It is clear that you believe that more emails will lead to results. We have heard you. Now please let your statewide elected officials hear you. We will, as I noted, continue to work all angles on the SRO issue, and will continue to keep the community informed when we have any updates to share. I'm going to take a moment now to just read to the community what this letter said. And as I said, it'll be posted on our website tomorrow. Do you want me to read the whole letter? Or okay, so we highlight the fact that there are ongoing challenges concerning keeping our schools safe, and that we are writing specifically to request an exemption for security personnel expenditures from the tax levy limit law calculation. We write that we anticipate substantial increases in our security personnel costs for the 2024-2025 school year based on community feedback in our current national and global security climate. We also note, and I'm just excerpting here, you can read the whole note tomorrow. We're also noting the disparities in local support that some school districts receive versus others in the form of school resource officers and the funding for them. So what we're asking for is 2023A I-5 includes tax levy limits and also authorizes certain exemptions from that tax levy limit. What we are requesting is a new exemption covering costs for school district security personnel, school district security vendors, school district security consultants, and school resource officers. So, as I said, this will be posted on our website tomorrow, and we strongly encourage community members who support this endeavor to please write to your elected officials and ask them to support our requests. And we will keep you updated. I want to also briefly update you on the work we're doing as part of our DEI curriculum work. Dr. Ackerman's report will provide more information, and I don't want to be redundant, but do want to be emphatic that we are committed to educating our students on and to the best of our ability, preventing incidences of anti-Semitism, as we are committed to educating our students on all forms of racism, religious discrimination, and hate of any kind. All of our students will learn from our DEI work in an age-appropriate manner, and we will continue to evaluate our curriculum and materials at all levels to make sure that they adequately address anti-Semitism as well as other forms of racism and hate. The board and the administration will also be taking advantage of learning opportunities in the coming weeks that are geared towards helping public schools teach anti-Semitism. I'm sure these will only further the work that our teams have been doing. We remain staunchly committed to eradicating hate and discrimination in any form from our schools. Shifting gears, I attended the NYSBA Advocacy and Governance meeting last Monday, the 16th. It was very long. There were 56 resolutions on the table, and 35 were adopted. One of those that was adopted mirrors our own request for expenditures for school safety to be exempted from the tax cap calculation. There was an additional related resolution which would raise the cap on what retired police officers can earn if they serve as SROs subsequent to retirement. There were also resolutions opposing any additional unfunded mandates, requesting additional funding for student mental health programs, trying to have the state bear some of the research costs on implementing electric school buses, and a number of other issues. I've tried to highlight those most relevant to our district. They are all available online if somebody is interested in reading about all 56 resolutions or the 35 that were adopted. For those of you who are wondering, how does one organization effectively advocate for 35 positions at once? I was wondering the same, which is part of our motivation for doing our own advocacy issues as a district on issues that are deeply important to us. Finally, the Festival of Diwali begins on Sunday, November 12th. I know that feels like a long way off, but it is before our next meeting. So I wanted to wish our families and school community members who are celebrating a wonderful holiday. Diwali celebrates the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. Whatever our faiths, I think we can all agree that we need more of these victories in our world. So before I turn over to the superintendent's report, we have under the president's report 1.1.1, which is the board acknowledging the correspondence that I outlined that was sent to the New York State legislators by myself and Dr. Ackerman, advocating for the inclusion of a security personnel and services exemption in the provisions of education law, section 2023A. I will move 1.1.1. Can I have the second? Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That is it from me.
Thank you. And so now we're going to transition, and I'd like to call up Suzanne Lodge on behalf of the PTA, because we've had our school board appreciation week, and now the PTA would like to share their appreciation to our school board before the superintendent's report. Yep.
I know that we missed last week was School Board Appreciation Week, but we did not want to forget belated but very heartfelt thank you to all of you. We understand how much time and effort and energy goes into the job that you do, and you do it all so well. And we just want to say thank you on behalf of the PTA and our community. And I think I'm not alone in wanting to.
Yes, I'm going to yield some time to CCT President Mike DeBellis, who also would like to express his appreciation.
Thank you. On behalf of the Chappaqua Congress of Teachers, CCT, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude for your unwavering commitment and invaluable contributions to the Chappaqua School Board. Your dedication to fostering an environment conducive to learning and growth is truly commendable. Your efforts in advocating for quality education, ensuring the welfare of our students, and supporting the professional growth of our teachers have not gone unnoticed. The leadership and vision you provide help shape the educational landscape of our district. We appreciate your continuous support and look forward to continuing our work together in creating a better future for our students and the entire Chappaqua community. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. It's very much appreciated.
All right, a little mid presentation break here. Great. Thank you, Suzanne and Mike. And so we'll pull up the community update. And I just would like to highlight a few items before Adam presents the second half of our assessment report. And then we will transition to a presentation on the chap plan by Lee Jones. So you could just pull that up. I just want to provide an update on, we had a lot of feedback from our last meeting on how we were moving forward in supporting our students, our children, on helping them and our families as the terrorist attacks on Israel continue to unfold in the media. And so I just wanted to provide an update on where we are with our approach in supporting our children here. So first, as we already know that the district sent out after the attack instructions to our faculty K through 12 on how to support our students instructionally and social emotionally. And then I had sent out a communication to the district. And since that time, the district equity team met and we talked about, okay, what are some things that we need to be thinking about based on the feedback we're receiving from our children in our classroom. And our social studies teachers at the high school and in grades 7 through 8 provided an overview of the conflict in the region, which is what Adam's going to talk about in a minute, to provide some context for our kids based on what we were hearing from them and what we felt like we needed to do based on our discussion of the DET around how to move forward. And then our principals had sent a communication out to our parents this week just to inform them that these lessons had taken place. And moving forward, the DET recommended that our middle schools begin to prepare hate speech lessons for the middle level to be delivered by mid-November. And so they're working on that right now with our DEI professional developers, and the policy committee is planning to meet next week to talk about some of the concerns that were raised during public comments that we feel like we need to address through board policy. So I am going to turn it over to Adam just to give a general overview of what those lessons look like in our classrooms. They've already been delivered, so we just felt it would be helpful for the board to understand what work has taken place since our last meeting instruction.
Thank you, Christine. So the next slide here has basically the lesson arc that we used for students in grade 7 all the way up through grade 12, but we scaffolded the complexity of some of the materials, like the article, for example. Students use different levels, different articles at the different levels, but I just wanted to talk you through what that period looked like. It was about a 55-minute period and had a series of activities. We started with what we call the compass, and the compass is a way to engage students in conversations about how they approach complex and challenging issues. I don't think I can click this. Oh, here we go. All right, so the compass has 4 points. It's a moral approach, an intellectual approach, an emotional approach, and a social approach. And so we talk to students about kind of their headspace as they engage in conversations, and for them to be able to recognize, for example, if they're approaching the conversation in an intellectual way, but the person they're speaking with is approaching it in an emotional way, then there could be potentially some tension there. And so for them to be able to have that language, that's where we started the lesson. Then we went on to norms for the class and the discussion. This isn't working. I think you're gonna have to click for me. The norms include things like, engaging in the conversation with respect, to use I statements, to ask questions, to share airtime, those kinds of things. So these 2 components are what we call the safely in part of the lesson. And then I'll discuss the safely out in a minute, but this is to kind of level set so we can make sure we have a productive period. Then our social studies teachers went through the geography of the region. Oh, they're telling me I can click now. Let's see. All right, the geography of the region, including the Middle East, the Gaza Strip, Israel, its neighbors, just to give students an idea of like, where are we talking, what region of the world are we talking about? And we also talked about the difference between national identities and religious identities. For some students, they confuse those things. So like, what nation are you from, as opposed to what religious group do you identify with or affiliate with? So we went through some of the like language and vocabulary around those things related to this current conflict. Then we went through some vocabulary with regard to norms about the language that we use, and we addressed specifically anti-Semitism and Islamophobia as part of that, to make sure the discussions and the classroom discussions were safe and that students were aware of those things. Then we engaged in an article. sorry, I'm having a little trouble seeing the screen. We engaged in an article, which was a reading. This is the part that we really differentiated by level. The next part was a why now. We kind of zoomed out into the region and engaged students in some work around like what is happening in the actual region, who are the superpowers in the region, what role does Iran and Saudi Arabia play in this current conflict. So there was a little bit of teaching into the why now part. Then towards the end of the lesson, we discussed the U.S. policy position. We relied on the Council of Foreign Relations as a source, and also the students were able to watch a short clip, a 2-minute clip of a Biden address on the topic, so they understood the U.S. policy portion of this. And then the last thing, the safely out part, was the reflection, and we revisited the compass to kind of create that like closure of that safe space and exit. And so we got positive feedback. We were really thoughtful about the approach of it. We had opportunities with our faculty to make sure that they engaged in some professional learning around this and were able to model this lesson for them, so they felt confident going in. And then we also pushed in our professional development team to support teachers as they were delivering this lesson. So all students, as Christine mentioned, in grades 7 through 12 had some variation of this lesson with age appropriate content.
I would just suggest if parents have any questions, they can reach out to their child's social studies teacher. They can reach out to their building administrator. And if your child's in grades K through 6, we're not going to be engaging in work in this way in those classrooms. The DET at this point didn't feel like that was appropriate, but you are welcome to support your children in your homes the way that you best feel is necessary. But if you have any questions or you need help processing and supporting conversations with your students, we have our psychologists available in all of our buildings to help support our staff. I do want to say that often we get questions from elementary parents about what's happening at the secondary level. I feel like those conversations are best with your building level team. So if there are elementary parents that have questions about instruction that's related to their children, they should really reach out to their building principals. And if they have secondary parents that have questions about experiences that they're having in our classroom, those questions are for the secondary principals. It's not appropriate for elementary principals to be reaching out to our secondary principals when they don't have kids in classes there. So I would encourage that not to happen, because those parents will be redirected. And sometimes that does happen when we're dealing with supporting a community through moments in time that are really challenging on a variety of levels. And we're going to do our best to support everyone, but our focus is and always has to be our children and what our children need. So I want to thank Adam and his professional development team for organizing us and our social studies teachers for delivering lessons to our students. And if we feel like we need to do more, the DET will reconvene, we'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, and then we'll plan forward in a way that we feel is appropriate for our kids. And we'll continue to keep the community updated on our progress. Any questions from the board on any of the work that we've done before we transition? And I anticipate on the 15th, we'll be doing an update from the policy committee on what our work looks like based on our feedback from our last public comment session. All right, so before we move into the academic part of the presentation where Adam shares the assessment report because the state scores were released, I just want to share we're ahead of schedule, and our SROs are at the elementary and middle school are going to be on site on Monday. So our Jim Carroll's commitment was that we would hit the November 1st deadline, but we're able to begin the program earlier. So we are continue to be appreciative of our partnership with Newcastle Police Department. And so our shared SROs will begin on Monday. And so I want to thank Josh for being able to help support that as well. And so we look forward to welcoming our new officers to the team next week. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to you and for the annual assessment report, part 2.
All right, so the New York State has unembargoed, is that a word? Unembargoed the New York State data. It was embargoed for a while. We were allowed to share it with parents, but we weren't allowed to share it publicly when we did the first data presentation. So here's part 2, now that it's been unembargoed, and this is mostly state data. And then I also have a follow-up slide. There were some questions around SAT and ACT, so we'll get into that towards the latter part of the report. All right, so this is just kind of the report organization. Just as a reminder, at our September meeting, we went through MAP scores, advanced placement scores, SAT scores. Those are not New York State assessments, so we were able to share those data. And then today, as I said, we'll do the 3 through 8 testing data, Regents exam data, and that follow up on SAT and ACT data. right, so we're going to start with ELA, math and science. Those assessments, ELA and math, are given to all students in grades 3 through 8. Science typically given to students in grades 4 and 8, although that's changing. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get a little bit further into the presentation. Just as a reminder, each year I think about like how far back is it helpful for me to provide context, and so I try to take out some of the data as we go, but I just wanted to note data validity. Sometimes when we look at these graphs and charts, we take these numbers in a way that perhaps they have more weight to them than maybe they should, because we forget the context of what was happening at the time. And so there's a few slides here just in terms of the data validity. And I wanted to have you recall that back in 2021, we were challenged by New York State assessments having released content, recycled content. And so some of our students had like practice assessments, and depending, New York State will release questions, and depending on which assessments your class may have practiced, leading up to the assessment, you may have even seen the passages and even gone over the questions. And so there was a bit of a validity question for us as a district with regard to like, what do those results mean for us, and how can we use them? So that's just a little bit of the backdrop. There was also no extended response in 2021 to the assessments, which usually there is. So, they kind of changed. It's a little bit of apples to oranges as we look from year to year. There's also in 2022, you might remember I sent this letter. Some of you had students in these grades at the time. Maybe most of you got this letter. And this was about the length of the test, which we were surprised, like post-COVID, they give us the tests are untimed, but they give us a framework with regard to how long the test would likely take, and you should schedule it. And our students were taking far longer, and it turned out that was pretty typical in the state. So that was another thing, that it felt like a test of stamina in some cases, as much as it was a test of like what we were trying, or what the state was trying to test. So those things are things that make the interpretation of the data a little bit more complicated when we look from year to year. So just an overview of what these assessments are. The ELA test is multiple choice and open-ended questions. Typically, although that's changed, as we were working through COVID, students apply their knowledge in open-ended response, explain their reasoning. Students read text, write constructed responses, write extended responses. It does include some multiple choice questions as well for the ELA grades 3 through 8. Those reports have now been released. So if there's any parents watching and they haven't accessed Backpack, they are in the Backpack in a folder that has New York State assessments. So you can see these are reports that we get from the state, and we upload them directly. So that's just if parents haven't seen those, you can access those in the Backpack. Here you see our ELA scores, grades 3 through 8 from year to year, from 2019 to 2023. You can see in 2020, there was no assessment given, that was canceled. And then you can see the kind of results. But again, you have to keep in mind that framework with regard to like some of the tests, adjustments, validity issues that have happened. So there's a couple of ways to read these charts. One of them is you can follow a cohort. For example, if you look at the gray line in grade 3, that group becomes the blue line in grade 4, and then the orange line in grade 5. So you can look at like cohorts. Oh, I'm sorry. Can't see the whole, sorry, I can't, let me back up just a little bit. So this is ELA, grades 3 through 8. I can't see the screen so well, so I'm looking at my screen and that screen. Sorry, I was one ahead. So there's a few ways to read these data. You can read it like a trend within a grade. So you can look at grade 3 or 4 or 5 and see how like that grade is performing, or you can read it as a cohort as you move from year to year. So for example, if you look at the gray line for grade 3, they become the blue line for grade 4, and then the orange line for grade 5. So you can track the cohort over time. You can also look at a grade level over time and kind of look for trends. But again, the trends are a little bit challenging. You have to be careful to look at trends with regard to all the changes in the assessments. All right, this next graph is a distribution of students for ELA grades 3 through 8 at the different levels. The state basically identifies level 3 and 4 as students that are proficient, although the AIS cut score is usually like in the middle of a level 2. But this just gives you a basic distribution. This is skewed to the right in a positive way. Typically across the state, it doesn't look like this with regard to the steps up to the right. The higher scores up towards the right is a good thing, obviously, level 3s and 4s that you can see here. All right, so let me transition on to the math test. This is just a little bit of an overview of the math test. There's multiple choice questions. There's open-ended questions for students to graph and solve problems. Students apply their knowledge and in open-ended responses explain their reasoning. Students solve real-world problems. There's graphs, charts, tables for them to read and interpret. And again, this is a similar graph to the ELA. There's a couple of different ways to read it, but you can see it goes from 2019 to 2023. And again, you can look at, trends across the grade, but also cohorts as they move through the grades. And then just like with ELA, this is the distribution of 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s for last year. And this is in math. Total, and you can see the total number of students, 1609 that took the assessment. All right, let me just touch on science and then I can pause if there's any questions on these data before we kind of transition onto regions data. So these data are a little bit tricky in that the New York State science curriculum is changing to the NGSS. The NGSS curriculum is shifting the way we teach science to be a much more skills-based science. There's science and engineering practices, things like data interpretation, modeling, designing experiments, conducting experiments. It's different than the science that many of us were taught, which was a real emphasis on like vocabulary. Many of us memorized like the parts of the cell and what they did and things like that. So the shift now is to have students think like scientists and not necessarily memorize and know all the things that scientists know. You do see a little bit of a dip there from 93, 96, and then it goes to 90%. What's happened is last year is the last year of the traditional assessment, which was very vocabulary heavy. We've really shifted our curriculum. It's not something you can just like snap your fingers and shift your entire curriculum, but because students that were being taught in this content heavy way then all of a sudden would have to shift to a skills-based curriculum, which we think the skills-based curriculum is a better option anyway. Most of us don't remember all that vocabulary from science. You're better off learning the skills, the data analysis, the experimentation, design, those kinds of things. I think is a stronger approach. So we've been shifting that. And I think that dip that you see there to a 90, which is still a strong score, is really a result of us teaching a new curriculum. And there's an old test for one more year. This year, there's a new test. So I think we're well prepared for that. And the students will do well. You have to remember that we're also shifting. We're in a place where our students will be exempt from this assessment because of living environment. So we'll have living environment data and not science 8 data, but we're shifting NGSS all the way up through 7th grade. So I think we're in a good position there, but I wouldn't, overinterpret that 90% there because it's last year of an old assessment that's been in place for, I think, over 25 years. All right, and then this is the Science 8 distribution. This is the last of the grade 3 through 8 assessment slide. So let me pause there, and if there's any questions on the assessments, state assessments, grades 3 through 8.
So I have one question, which is, can you speak to, so looking back at both the ELA and the math, the bar charts, and I think the ELA is more pronounced, but it's also true with the math, that even taking out the COVID years, the 5th grade scores seem lower than the rest of the years. The rest of the years all are very high. And 5th grade is sort of a noticeable dip from where the other years are. And obviously, because each bar is a cohort, it's not that there's one grade that's not performing. That grade goes back up the next year. So can you speak to sort of what we should think with the 5th grade numbers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's also been a concern of ours. It's been something that we've been working on really for 3+ years now. There's a couple of things that I'm thinking about when I look at this chart. The first one is that 5th grade is typically in elementary schools in most New York State schools. So New York State sets the kind of the scoring bars every year after they see the assessment results. So the students are scaled across the state once they get the results, and our students in 5th grade, which is a transition year, are basically being compared to students that are in their final year of most schools. Now, keep in mind that in most elementary schools, the teachers have great flexibility with regard to how the schedule is designed. So Most fifth grade teachers have a big block of reading that they teach, a big block of writing that they teach, math every day, and then they will alternate, for example, like science and social studies. Science and social studies typically in New York State in fifth grade don't have a full period every single day. Our fifth grade is structured a little bit differently because it's a middle school. To support that transition over the last 3 years, we've done a couple things. There's been a lot of curriculum work. Benchmark is fairly new for us. There's been grammar, spelling, vocabulary instruction explicit in fifth grade. There's new fidelity to a scope and sequence for literacy in fifth grade. That's the units of study that we did not have 4 years ago. We've now created 2-person teams to help with the transition. So we used to have 4-person teams where different teachers would teach math, science, English, social studies, and the students had to transition to 4 different places and 4 different teachers and 4 different, potentially expectations, et cetera, which was a big jump for fifth graders and not typical typically what you'd see. So 2-person teams, we now have larger blocks of time, double periods scheduled for ELA and social studies. So the teacher has discretion with regard to how to use that time. If they want to do a longer block of reading and writing, they can, teach social studies every day if they choose. It doesn't have to be a full period. In the past, it was always kind of locked into a full 55-minute period. Now there's a lot more teacher discretion in there. There's less transitions because the students have one teacher for English and social studies and a different teacher for math and science. And again, the math science teacher has that latitude where if they want to teach a 90-minute math block, they can. If they want to teach a 90-minute science block, they can. They can do 60 minutes and 30 minutes. They can, adjust it as they see fit. So there's a lot of that latitude. We've also done some things in the classroom to make them a little bit more elementary-like. We've put rugs in classrooms, more tables, more flexible furniture. We've kind of moved away. Our fifth grade classes for a long time looked like what you'd see in maybe a traditional Greeley classroom. And now they look much more like a blend of what you'd see in like a 4th grade to 6th grade kind of a classroom. So our hope is that's a long-winded answer. I apologize for that. It's been a lot of work over the last 3 years to do that. I think the experience is a stronger one for students in fifth grade, both curricularly, but also just the age-appropriate transition of going from a system of having one teacher all day to a system where you've got 2 core teachers. I think that's a better transition. And then 4th grade is back to the regular team structure. All right, let me skip a few slides here and go on to the region's results. All right, so the first slide is the English regions. The English regions is still one of the 4 required exams. You can see the results here, pretty consistent over time with an 89%. This is the mean score. So 89% 2023, 89% 2022. The English regions, all the students take, it's a graduation requirement. So the exams that all the students take are better indicators of overall performance of the cohort. Some of these exams are not required exams. And so those grades you tend to see go up and down depending on who's taking them. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, so here's the ELA regions distribution. You can see how, the different grade ranges and how they are, distribute over time. Here is the algebra regions. This is the mean. Again, there was a shift to algebra for all students in middle school. So you can see in 2021, we had a high school cohort and a middle school cohort. That was the first year where all the students in 8th grade took algebra, and then 2022, that's middle school. 2023, that's middle school. So those are the mean scores. And then the next slide, you can see the algebra regions distribution. I think there's a question about that as well. I don't know if you want to ask that question now while we're on this slide, or I can keep going through.
Sure, no, I'm happy to ask it now. The green slice caught my eye, because while there's green on some of the other slide, that's very slim, but here it seems to be getting bigger. And since that's the non-passing color, I wanted you to talk to that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One of them is the green part is getting larger, and so is the blue part, right? So you're thinking about what's happening with the cohort of students is basically saying there's less students in the middle, and more students that are below 64 or above 85, right? So that we're noticing that too. Just in terms of the number, I know the number's not here. That green slice in 2023 was 10%, in 2022 was 8%. So it is, it's a couple percentage points that in terms of an increase, it's definitely a trend that we want to watch. You have to keep in mind that we typically would associate a 64 as like a failing grade, but there is a Regents exam safety net, so students can graduate with a local diploma, depending on their, kind of their profile. If they have a student with an IEP, a 504, there are other exceptions to this, where students can get that credit for getting a 55, between a 55 and a 64. So that's considered passing for a local diploma. So for those students, they don't necessarily have to take this exam again, although most of those students would end up in a course in high school, like a Foundations Cornerstones class, where they would take the assessment a second time. But yeah, that's a trend that, when we first see it for a year or even two, we've got to keep an eye on. Next year, we'll certainly keep an eye on that to track those students to see, is that green bar growing is not a good thing. And so we've got to keep an eye on that as we go. All right, so this next graph is a table again of region scores. Now, it is important to note that some of these are part of all students taking them, and other ones are a little bit more of a niche group of students taking them. So for a course like US, let me start at the top, like chemistry, all students don't take, many students do. In the 10th grade year, students will typically come out of living environment in the current system in 9th grade, and then they'll choose between chemistry or earth science. Usually earth science runs with many fewer sections than chemistry. Most of our students go on out of living environment into chemistry. A small handful go into earth science. So that number being lower, so usually students that, in some cases they really wanted to take earth science. In most cases, they didn't feel like they're ready for chemistry, and so they take earth science to give themselves an extra year before jumping into chemistry. And so you see that number is not representative of a whole cohort. It's a smaller cohort that took earth science. US history, which is on the bottom, is a little bit different in that our AP US students have a choice between taking US history regions or taking A-push, the kids call it, AP US history. The majority of kids take AP US history. I think last year we had 2 sections. We had about 30 students. So this number, this score of a 77 for US history, is a group of 30 students. It doesn't include the AP US history students. The AP US history students, if they get a 3, 4, or 5, 3 or better, they get Regents credit for the course, so they don't need to take that Regents exam. And in addition, with the change of rules, US history used to be a requirement. It used to be a required Regents to graduate, and it's no longer a required Regents. With the 4+1 rule, students they only have to take 1 social studies Regents, and for our kids that's global, and so this can be a +1, but it doesn't need to be. So the AP US history students typically don't take this Regents exam. I don't think any of them took it last year. If there were some, it was a very small number. So that's why you see that number is lower there. Living environment students typically take, you see that 87. Global, our students, the cohort takes, and ELA, the whole cohort takes. So you see that kind of fluctuation in the numbers based on which pockets of kids are taking those exams. All kids or just some of those kids. All right, these are, there's been a lot of shifts with our algebra courses. I wasn't even sure, this 85 was on a previous slide. This might be a slide we could take out, but it's kind of just shows how courses are evolving over time. We no longer offer these students are not taking these Regents exams for these particular courses in 2022, 2023. We will have some data for the Cornerstones course, for example. As we go forward, we can start to present those data as part of the shift in math.
Are scores on the same test, but taking different classes?
That's right. And
Okay.
these courses have been phasing out with the shift to algebra for all. There used to be several layers. Now we have Josh on the DS, he can get into all the nuances of the history of the math department. But these courses, there used to be several varieties of algebra. This should different kind of levels of algebra in 9th grade, but with algebra for all in 8th grade, that's not. We don't need to do that anymore. So now we have a kind of a basic algebra for students that either are new to the district and didn't take algebra in 8th grade, or are students in algebra that took algebra in 8th grade and they want another shot at it to increase their skill set and build a better foundation in algebra. So
Okay, so all these numbers are reflective of the Regents. It's just what course the kids took to get to the Regents.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right. Yep.
So all the kids in 8th grade take the same math class now?
No, there's enriched algebra and algebra 8. Those are the 2 choices. So there's two different levels.
But everyone takes the same test at the end.
Yeah. All right. just a couple more slides. Thank you for bearing with me. So this slide, I believe I included this one in the last presentation, but if I didn't, just so you know what you're looking at, the SAT means are there. There were some questions about the number of students taking these tests, so I pulled some extra data for you to consider. So this is the SAT mean. You can see that 1367 in 2023, and then the reading part, and then the math part, you can see 673 and 694 respectively. So that's SAT scores. And then the next slide is ACT scores. You can see pretty consistent, 29s, 29 and a half. Now, the interesting thing that we pulled based on the board's questions last time is these are the number of students taking these assessments. So there were some questions around, like, are we seeing as the schools are going test optional? We're hearing more of that. Is part of what we're seeing with regard to the change in strength, the SAT scores went up. So the question I think was is that because less students are taking the test? And in this case, you can see was it 8 students or so kind of different. So I don't, and to be honest, we didn't even factor in the cohort size. You'd have to look at your junior and senior class cohort size. So those they've been pretty consistent, really, but they do vary a little bit. So I think we're just seeing just kind of normal increase and decrease with the SAT. The ACT, I'll be honest, I was really surprised to see the drop that we saw all the way down to only 52 students and then the spike back up. I think this undulation that you're seeing up and down is us trying to figure out, students trying to figure out what does test optional really mean to me? Am I applying to colleges that are test optional? Should I take it anyway? Our advice with regard to, counseling advice with regard to students that should or shouldn't take it. So I think this might take a little while as colleges settle into whether who's going to be test optional, who's not. And what does that mean for students in terms of taking these assessments? So it was amazing to me to see how consistent our ACT data is with that huge drop in the number of students taking it. I would think that with only 52 students that perhaps really strong students chose to take it and you'd see an increase, but we just didn't really see that. It seems pretty consistent. So we can continue to dig into that, work with our counselors and what does that mean for graduates as they apply to college, and colleges are changing their admissions requirements all the time with regard to test optional and things like that. So that's the presentation. Certainly if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them if I can.
Thank you, Adam. And so that is the end of the superintendent's report, and we're actually going to transition now to a presentation from Lee Jones, who's been the lead senior designer of the chapline. And so Lee, can I invite you to come up to the podium, and we're going to give you the clicker. And so just for some context, the town of Newcastle has asked for a letter of support for the chapline in terms of applying for grants. And the Board of Education had a work session last month with Lee and with Jill Shapiro, the town administrator, to understand this further and to ask questions. And now we're at the point where we've asked Lee just to do a very brief, a 10-minute overview of the chapline, just so the public can understand what this looks like, what the potential of this could be for our students, and then give the public the opportunity to make comments either tonight or at our next meeting before the board would consider acting on a correspondence that would be given to the town to submit as a part of their grant application project and process in support of the project from the district's perspective. So we're at the point where we just would like a public overview so we can hear any public comments, and then we could move forward with a potential resolution to present a letter of support to the town. That's a pretty accurate description, right? So Lee, welcome. Thank you for being a part of our meeting tonight, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm here on behalf of the town of Newcastle, and your town administrator and town supervisor are also here with us tonight. My name is Lee Jones. I'm a landscape architect with Barton and LaJudas, a consulting firm working with the town over the last few years to design a proposed off-road shared use path. Just tonight, as Superintendent Ackerman mentioned, I'll just be giving a brief overview, bringing you through the background and the objectives of the town for this trail, proposed trail, looking at the existing conditions, the proposed trail route, and then just some of the design criteria so you can understand what to expect from this proposed trail. This is, the town is looking at, this is all on town property, unused town property following a Westchester County sewer trunk line. So there's a portion of this town property that was cleared. The proposed route does not follow the trunk line exclusively, as portions of that, the county sewer line does fall through private properties and the school property here at Horace Greeley High School. It runs north to south, parallel to the Metro North Harlem line and the Sawmill River Parkway, connecting, starting at the southern end at North Greeley Avenue, again, going up through town property to connecting to the intersection of Horace Greeley High School and Chappaqua Crossing. This is again just an overview of, you can see on the bottom, an aerial just showing the key points along the proposed off-road shared use path. Just wanted to show you some existing condition photographs. This is the southern end of the proposed trail at, again, the northern end of North Greeley Avenue, the Chestnut Oak, the community of Chestnut Oaks. As you can see, there's the roadway that runs through the community. But in this portion where the town is proposing to use the property that is between the railroad tracks and the roadway to separate it from the community to the greatest extent possible. When we continue north, we go through existing wetland areas. Again, this is, you can see unused town properties. So again, hoping to develop this hidden gem for recreational purposes and commuting purposes, connecting downtown Chappaqua to the Chappaqua Crossing. After the wetland area, you can see the cleared area of the Westchester County sewer trunk line. And on the right, on the pictures on the top is obviously in the spring and summer. And on the north, you can see I'm standing on the sewer trunk line in those pictures, and you can see up to some of the private properties that it runs behind those properties. And the last piece is Roaring Brook Road. Looking up in the southern portion of this road is a right-of-way, which is town-owned property, a town right-of-way, where the trail would be developed off of the existing roadway to be a separated shared use path. And again, throughout this whole process, we've been the design consultants working with the town. And while the whole proposed trail is on town property, the town has been working closely with all of the key stakeholders and the adjacent land use owners, including private property owners, Horace Greeley High School, Chestnut Oaks, the Lawrence Farms community, and the Metro North Railroad. And my team is composed of landscape architects, civil engineers, traffic engineers, environmental scientists. So we've done all levels of assessment and a feasibility study, understanding what the best route is for this trail. And this is just a quick looking at the preferred trail route. We're not going to go into this in any great detail. This is the southern portion of it again, adjacent to the Chestnut Oaks property. And this is just a before and after, a rendering on the right-hand side and some cross sections, just looking at how we'll be separating the proposed trail from the existing Chestnut Oaks community, as well as separation from the existing Metro North Railroad, the Harlem line. So you can see a rendering on the lower right-hand side with the existing condition photo adjacent to it. And then as we move north, this is through the wetland area. And this is again, all on town property. And there are just some typical cross sections to preserve the wetlands and to allow for the habitat for flora and fauna to continue to thrive and minimal impact on them. We're proposing raised boardwalks through this area where it's wetlands. And then at portions where it's not wetlands, the trail will be at grade, as the upper section shows. And this is a typical cross section through one of the private properties along it. And the section below is a plan view and a section view. And the town again worked closely with these 5 private properties where the existing county sewer line goes through their property. It's difficult to see on this section, which is to scale, but there is a great separation from where that sewer line is and then to where the proposed boardwalk is even further out. Again, the town worked with all those private property owners to look at options of possible easements or acquisition, avoidance of the lands, and swapping the land with the town property. And moving north, the final portion of the trail is adjacent to Horace Greeley High School's property. Again, you can see the orange line there is the school property, and the white line is the proposed trail route, again, staying off of school property. There's a significant grade change here as well. This school campus is significantly higher than the proposed trail. And the final piece is it crosses the existing gorge, which you can see the proposed rendering on the right-hand side of this slide. The existing condition photograph shows the county sewer line going over that gorge, and this would be a pedestrian bridge that would cross this gorge, allowing the trail to connect up to Roaring Brook Road. And the intended use of this is for pedestrian use only, for non-motorized vehicles, except for maintenance and emergency vehicles. And there's a small proposed parking lot at the northern end where there's that existing pull-off on Roaring Brook Road now. And again, a rendering on the upper right showing how this proposed shared use path will be separate from the vehicular traffic on Roaring Brook Road. And at the southern end, right south of Chestnut Oaks, there would be on-street parking that's already existing could assist with accessing the trail, as well as the trail connects with existing sidewalks which connect to downtown. So there's obviously all of the downtown Chappaqua parking as well to provide access to the trail. This is just design criteria that I won't walk you through all of it, but the major gist of it is that it would be a 10-foot wide minimum shared use path, again, allowing for two-way traffic of people walking, people biking, and then again, the use of emergency or maintenance vehicles as required. These are just some typical images, again, of the asphalt path, and it will be at grade and a raised boardwalk through the wetland areas. And again, the town's intent with this, understanding that safety and security is important for all of the adjacent land use owners and just the users in general. They intend to have the town parks will be maintaining this proposed shared use path moving forward. It will be considered a linear park within the town, and the police will patrol it as part of the town patrol system. It is currently being proposed to be lit at night to allow the trail to be used for both commuters and for passive recreation. And there will be trail cameras, surveillance cameras as well, strategically along the pathway. And the final piece is just the overall branding, is understanding and allowing for signage at both the southern and northern ends, the trailheads, as well as along the path, so that users understand how far the trail is to get to another destination within the town. This allows users to use this again as a commuting trailway or as an out and back or a passive recreation. And that's all that I have. And again, I am here, and again, the town administrator and supervisor are here as well if there are any questions.
Thank you, Lee. Before the board provides comments, I just want to be clear about a few things. First of all, this is not on our property, and so this can happen without our consent. So that's not really what our discussion is. Their discussion is really based on a letter of support for this project to move forward as a part of the grant application process. And so maybe at this point we can kind of hear what everyone's thoughts are about moving forward and providing that letter of support for the town as they submit their grant application. So Hillary, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, I have no concerns about providing a letter of support. We had the opportunity to go out and really not only, hear the presentations and get all the information on sort of a slideshow, but we went out and looked at where this would be vis-a-vis Greeley. And it really is, if you haven't gotten to go look behind the school, there's a precipitous drop from the level that the campus is at to where the proposed trail is. Because I think that had been a concern, really, was what would potential access be from the trail. But someone would first have to scale the actual barriers being put up on the trail and then climb out of this ravine. And just to be blunt, there are easier ways to get here if somebody was interested in doing that. So I think that that made me feel more comfortable with the whole thing, was just really seeing that the gulch that we're talking about down to where this is being proposed. So that was really my only concern in terms of providing a letter of support. So I feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, I think after meeting with Lee previously with just the board during our work session and being able to walk and understand where it's going to be in terms of, you know, just what Hillary said, how close or how far it is from our school and how hard it is to get. There's that poison ivy field also, which Dr. Ackerman knows about. So yeah, I'm comfortable with the support letter.
Yeah, I have nothing further to add. I agree with what's been said so far.
I'm also very comfortable. I think we shouldn't neglect the use cases also for our students, for the cross-country team. It's not just, I think it'd be great for the community at large, but also for our students as well. So, I mean, we discussed this before, but I guess publicly on the record, I think we're all sort of universally in support.
I also agree. I think it'll be great for the town. I think it will be great for our students and all of us to have another space to walk, run, walk the dog, etc. So it's exciting.
Right, so then I'll work on drafting a a letter on behalf of the board with all the ways that we would use it, both instructionally and extracurricular. Lee, if it were to be able to move forward, and then I'll have that ready for your consideration at the next meeting. And then this would be the time for, if we had, not at this moment, but during public comment, if people had feedback they'd like the board to consider before we submit that letter, the moment would be tonight and at our next meeting, and I'll have a resolution prepared for your consideration as well on November 15th. And should you move forward and act on that, then we'll submit the letter to the town so they can share that with their work group who's putting together the grants.
Also, just if community members do want to submit a comment but don't want or are unable to come to the public meeting, you can always email us. We'll take comments by email as well. So if anybody, wants to get in touch with us about this, please do so by November 15th. If you're not able to come, if you're not here tonight or unable to come to that meeting. But we, welcome your feedback on this.
I would just like to say, as someone who's very responsible for safety and security, I went all the way down in. It is pretty far away from the high school. So there is a significant amount of space between where the path would be and the high school, and the benefits to us instructionally are significant. So I'm hopeful that as we move forward here, the town is able to make progress in securing the grant, and that we'd be able to partner with them to support the project, because there's a lot of different ways that we'd be able to use it during the school day and after school. So I thank them for their advocacy in it, and I appreciate that they sought to involve us in this process. If that letter will provide that layer of support that's necessary, I'm glad the board's considering providing it. So thank you. Yes. So thank you, Lee, very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Okay, so that's the end of the whole superintendent presentation section of the meeting. So Bertha. Oh no, I don't. We're good. Okay.
Great. Okay, that brings us to committee reports. I already gave you my feedback in the NISBA business meeting. Does anybody else have any committee reports on?
Okay, yes, we had our first Health and Safety Committee meeting on October 17th with Josh, and that was able to zoom in for a little bit of it because he was away for work. But
We talked about, all of the health and safety projects that's ongoing, particularly the capital projects that's health and safety related. For example, like the electronic locks on all K-6 buildings, rooms are installed, right, and completed. And the license plate reader is not yet installed yet, but is coming soon. And the sign in and out application is sort of in transition.
Yeah, so they're setting that up now and they're planning to transition that around Thanksgiving with the students of high school.
Okay. And then we talked about the walkie-talkie and the camera system upgrades. If you want to say more to that or not. I know because some things are a little bit more sensitive.
Right, so I think as we've talked about, we're in the midst of adding additional cameras, repointing cameras, upgrading our communications devices in our schools. And then we just talked about the progress of the capital project, where the locks, all of the safety features of the electronic locks are in place now, and those are complete. And then we talked about as we're moving to the next phases of the capital project.
I think one thing that was brought up was there was a classroom teacher there who did raise concerns about the temperatures during the hot days towards the end of the school year and then at the beginning of the school year, particularly this school year. And that was a concern. And we said, you know, that's not something just, you know, for the kids, but also for teachers. And we do have a heat alleviation plan in place, but we can always revisit that to see how we can make everyone that's in buildings, you know, more comfortable, because upstairs is definitely hotter and different buildings are made and differently. So, and it's laid out differently. So I know that Josh is going to look at that again.
Yeah.
Should we be in a different place by that in terms of the capital project and the air conditioned spaces that are part of that by this next hot season where we have like 8 months till we get there?
So the air conditioning projects of the capital project won't be completed by this spring. We're still waiting for the state to reply back to us, and then likely some work will start this summer. So it won't be ready by this spring when students are in session.
Okay, thanks.
I went to the Innovation Committee meeting last week where we did two things. We, as a group, looked at the redesign of the 3 classrooms that are intended for use with some of the new business courses that we've been talking about. And we'll also probably expand that to other courses, calling it the World Economic Lab or the WELL. And we got to look at some new ideas for architectural designs for how those classrooms might look. And so the whole group was critiquing those, providing more feedback. And we also spent a few minutes in the meeting doing some brainstorming about, well, what should be the next theme or goal or topic that committee takes up now that I think we're kind of winding down the greenhouse group that, you know, is where that came from when we were doing that work. So that committee tends to cycle every couple of years onto new topics. So we're trying to figure out what that next topic will be. I think that's it for me.
Just a quick update from the Wellness Committee. I was told that the butternut squash tasting happened at Royenbrook, I believe, and some other elementary schools, and heard it was a big success. So.
All right, so parents follow up. Make that squash at home. Your kids will eat it. All right, so that brings us to the public comment period. We welcome public comments, and in respect for each other's time, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Board members may be contacted by email or phone. After the public comment period has been completed, we may have a discussion amongst themselves regarding comments presented. We also just remind you, please not to use any personally identifying information about either students or adults in your comments. So anybody with a public comment, please come. All right. As there are no public comments, that brings us to approvals and ratifications. Can I have a motion, please, for 3.1 and 3.2, which are accepting the minutes of the October 11th and October 12th meeting and work sessions respectively? I move.
A second.
Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
I recommend 4.1 instructional as presented.
I'll move that we accept 4.1 as Dr. Ackerman has presented.
I will second that. Are there any questions or concerns? All in favor?
I recommend 4.2 non-instructional as presented.
I move that we accept superintendent's recommendations for 4.2. Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that brings us to 5, which is our consent agenda. The consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting in a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issues. So, as a preliminary matter, does anybody want to remove anything this evening from the consent agenda? Okay, then I will move items 5.1 through 5.7.
Second.
The consent agenda tonight includes CSE summaries, accepting the external audit management response and corrective action plan, some bid renewals, retainers. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion, please, for 6? I guess 6 point. Oh, there's nothing. We're gonna skip 6 and 7. All right, that brings us to 8. Which is the financials. Can I have a motion, please, to take 8.1 through 8.4 together? This is acknowledging receipt of the treasurer's report for 2023. I'm sorry, September of 2023, the appropriation status report for September of 2023, the revenue status report for September of 2023, and the extra classroom activity fund report for September of 2023. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions or concerns? All in favor of 8.1 through 8.4?
Aye.
All right, well, that brings us to our notice of future meetings. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, November 15th. We are fairly sure we will be here, but check the website. The show is the next night, and as you can see, it's going to be amazing. But there's a very elaborate set behind us, and if it becomes more elaborate, we don't want to get in their way. So check the website where we're going to be on the 15th, probably in this building, but we may move. Yeah. And then the meeting after that is December 13th at 7 p.m. Where we will be here. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I have a motion, please, to adjourn at 8:52 p.m.? I'll move. All in favor? We are adjourned.